My name is Brittany, and I work for the City of Austin's Watershed Protection Department. Today, we're going to be talking about all of our very special watersheds right here in the City of Austin. But before we do that, we have to know what a watershed is. A watershed is all of the land that everyone lives on and plays on, and when it precipitates on a watershed, all of the water will collect there and drain into the waterways at the lowest point in the land. One way you can remember what a watershed is to think of a snake shedding its skin. A watershed is very similar, except it's all of the land that sheds the water into our waterways. We can actually make a model of a watershed using our hands, placing them in this V shape. Our thumbs are going to represent those hills, the ridges, the really tall parts of our watershed, and our pinkies are going to represent those really low parts of our watershed. Now, because we have the force of gravity here on Earth, if it rains or precipitates on this watershed here, all of that water is going to drain down towards my pinkies. So anytime that we're talking about a watershed, what I really want you to remember is that we are talking about the land. Here's a picture with all of the watersheds that are in and around Austin. There are actually about 43 smaller watersheds in and around Austin that make up a much larger watershed called the Colorado River watershed. All the different colors you see here are a different watershed, and all of our watersheds are named after the waterways that they drain into. For example, I live here in the smaller yellow watershed that's called Country Club West. That means that the waterway within that watershed is Country Club West. Speaking of waterways, this map also shows this really long blue river that runs right through the city of Austin. This is the Colorado River, which runs through the city and forms the Highland Lakes. You might be more familiar with names like Lady Bird Lake, Lake Austin, Lake Travis, Lake LBJ, Lake Marble Falls, and Lake Buchanan. Our Colorado River is the longest river in Texas and stretches over 800 miles across the entire state. It goes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Most of Austin gets their drinking water from the Colorado River after it has been to a water treatment plant. I also want you to notice this part of the picture that is in the white patterned area. This area is what we call the recharge zone. The recharge zone is the area of land with caves, sinkholes, really large cracks and fractures where water can easily get into an underground aquifer, which is like an underground river that stores water. This picture shows some of the features in our recharge zone that allows for water to enter the aquifer. The top feature is a sinkhole. Some of you may have heard of sinkholes or maybe even seen a sinkhole before. Sinkholes are created when the underground rock and soil all collapse into a cave that is down below. Here in Austin, just like in this picture, we get pretty small sinkholes, but there are some places like down in Florida, that can get sinkholes that are big enough to swallow entire houses. We can see how easily water can enter an aquifer through something like sinkholes. This next feature is a cave. Some of you might have been to a cave before, and if you have, you might have gotten a cave kiss. A cave kiss is the water that drips on you from the roof of the cave. And although it has a kind of funny name, a cave kiss is actually another way that water will recharge our aquifer. If we were in the recharge zone, had X-ray vision, and looked down at our feet, we would see rock that looked like this. This is a type of sedimentary rock called limestone. This limestone is really unique because you can see all of the holes that are in it, and this makes it a very permeable rock. That means that water and pollution can easily travel through this rock. At any time that we have limestone that has all of these different holes in it, we call this karstic. So this is karstic limestone. And it's the same type of rock that our aquifer is made out of here in the city of Austin. aquifer is named the Edwards Aquifer, and this is a diagram of what our aquifer looks like. The Edwards Aquifer is a pretty big aquifer. It starts underground north of Waco, goes all the way south of San Antonio, and then continues west. And while we here in Austin get our drinking water from the Colorado River, people in places like San Antonio actually get all of their drinking water from the Edwards Aquifer. Because the Edwards Aquifer is made out of that karstic limestone rock, we call it a karst aquifer. This diagram shows us those sinkholes, caves, the really large cracks and fractures that allows for water to easily enter the underground aquifer. Water here in Central Texas is actually really neat, and even though it enters the aquifer, it can come back up to the surface through things called springs. There's actually a really famous spring that we have here in the city of Austin. That's right, it's Barton Springs. Barton Springs Pool is actually located in Zilker Park, and you might have even been swimming there before. If you've ever been to Barton Springs, you might have noticed this really large crack right in the side of the rock wall just below the lifeguard station. That large crack is actually what we call a fault, and it's one of the places where water from the Edwards Aquifer discharges back into Barton Springs Pool. Approximately 30 to 50 million gallons of water from the Edwards Aquifer comes back up into Barton Springs every day. That's approximately 400 gallons of water per second. There is also a limestone ledge that can be seen toward the shallow end of Barton Springs Pool. This ledge is actually the entrance to an underground cave where water also discharges from the Edwards Aquifer into Barton Springs. Those of you who have been out swimming at Barton Springs Pool probably thought that that water was pretty cold when you were there. The temperature in Barton Springs Pool actually stays between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit all year long. So when we go swimming during the summer, when it's about 90 to 100 degrees outside, that water feels pretty chilly. But if we went swimming in winter, when the weather is probably about 40-50 degrees, that water is actually going to feel really nice and warm. There's actually an event every year on New Year's Day where you can go swimming at Barton Springs completely for free. So that's a really great opportunity to be able to go out and actually see and experience all of the things that we've talked about today. Just make sure that you take something really nice and warm so when you get out, you can bundle up afterward. For additional fun and educational videos, visit austintexas.gov/watershed/youth ed.